Hey, it's Dr. Glenn Davies coming to you from the greenhouse. So why from a greenhouse? Well, it's because I don't have a green screen, I don't have a green room, so the closest I can come up with is a greenhouse. Other reasons, the lighting and audio is pretty good in here. So I've been procrastinating about making this video for quite some time because I think it's really important. What I have been perplexed by is how can a keto diet, which is low in carbohydrate and high in fat, and a vegan diet, which is low in fat, both reverse type 2 diabetes. So that's really what I want to discuss in a little bit more detail, because I think I've stumbled across the mechanism that explains that. It's what I've been searching for 4 years, and I hope I can do it justice, and I wonder if it's what some of you might have been perplexed about as well. So back in 2018, Professor John Stevens shared the DIRECT trial, and that was a revelation for me. Up until that time, I thought that type 2 diabetes was a chronic, progressive condition that couldn't be reversed or put into remission. And the DIRECT trial that used a calorie-restricted diet, 850 calories per day, 46% of the participants reversed their type 2 diabetes. That really was a game changer for me. Except there seemed to be a problem. Humans don't like near starvation, and 850 calories is very, very significant calorie restriction. And the problem that I saw was that's unlikely to be sustainable. And then I came across Luke Wilson's BROAD trial. He demonstrated in Gisborne that you could reverse type 2 diabetes with a vegetarian or whole food plant-based diet, which I found really interesting. Then I learned that you can reverse diabetes with bariatric surgery. Again, another completely different mechanism. And then through a series of events, including listening to Professor Grant Schofield, I learned about ketogenic diets, so low carbohydrate, high fat diets. Subsequently came across the VERTA research and research from David Unwin in the UK, demonstrating very, very clearly that a ketogenic diet can reverse type 2 diabetes. And then came across Jason Fung's books showing that you can reverse diabetes with fasting and intermittent fasting. So they all seem to be significantly different techniques for reversing diabetes, and I have just been perplexed to understand how these different techniques can all bring about the same outcome. Then recently, through Dr. Matt Phillips, who is a neurologist from Waikato Hospital, I've come across his paper, which is Metabolic Strategies in Healthcare, a New Era. And he talks about the role of mitochondria and mitochondrial dysfunction. And that's when I think I started to get very much closer to understanding the mechanism by which these different techniques can bring about the same outcome. And then more recently, I've read Stephen Gundry's book, Unlocking the Keto Code, and then done quite a lot of research, particularly looking at the papers that he specifically mentions. And I think I've probably got an explanation for my 2 years of being unable to, or my 4 years of being unable to answer this question: how can a low-fat vegan diet and a high-fat keto diet bring about the same outcomes? So I think it's about mitochondrial dysfunction. So this is my basic understanding of mitochondria. So we have trillions of cells in our body, and inside each cell there are 1,000 to 2,500 mitochondria. And the mitochondria's main job is to make ATP, which is the main fuel for the body. Okay, so the mitochondria are making ATP, and there are a lot of mitochondria, and a 70 kilogram man makes 70 kilograms of ATP in a day, which is quite astounding. So there is a lot of process going on within those mitochondria, and it's hugely important. So our mitochondria functioning well are just so important to not just our metabolic health, but every aspect of health. So let's look in a little bit more detail. So the mitochondria are responsible for both anabolic processes, so building bigger molecules, and catabolic processes. And that balance between anabolism and catabolism is really important. And that's where the role of fasting seems to come in. Fasting balances anabolism and catabolism. Now let's look a little bit more detail at within the mitochondria. So there's the electron transport chain, and then there's the ATP generation molecule. So there's 4 parts to the electron transport chain, and electrons are transported across those 4 proteins, and protons are generated by that transfer of electrons. Then the protons which have moved outside the cytoplasm come back in through the ATP generating molecule, and that generates ATP. Now, there's a bit more to it. So if the electron transport chain is not coupled or not connected to the ATP generation, then we generate heat and not ATP. The other really important part to this is that as electrons are transferred across that electron transfer chain, we create reactive oxygen species. Reactive oxygen species. So inflammation or oxidative stress. So balancing that oxidative stress and heat production with ATP production seems to be the key to keeping our mitochondria healthy. Now, so this process of separating the electron transfer chain from the ATP generating molecule, that is called uncoupling. And there are uncoupling proteins which are responsible for that process. And this seems to be probably the key to mitochondrial health. So what I then learned is, how do you signal to your mitochondria to uncouple the electron transfer chain from the ATP generating molecule? And lo and behold, this I think is the key answer. So there are a whole number of different proteins which act as uncoupling molecules. One of the most important is ketones. Okay, ketones are key signaling molecules that signal to the mitochondria to uncouple. Ketones. Okay, that explains the ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting. But, okay, polyphenols, which are in plants, also are signaling molecules. And so that's my light bulb moment. Polyphenols in plants are signaling molecules which signal uncoupling. So that's how the vegan diet potentially could work. And ketones from intermittent fasting and a ketogenic diet are also signaling molecules. So there are different ways of signaling to our mitochondria to be healthier, to produce less reactive oxygen species. And there are a whole lot of things that can do this. So spices can do it, herbs can do it, cold water immersion can do it, saunas can do it, ketones can do it. They all act as uncoupling molecules. So basically all of these things that we know are healthy, they seem to work through this process. And the stuff that we know that is unhealthy, an example, Roundup or glyphosate, that is a coupling molecule. So will result in the production of more oxidative stress and more damage to our mitochondria. So I reckon I've got it. I reckon this explains diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome. It explains cancer. Now, this is really interesting. So we thought that it was the nucleus and the DNA of the cancer cell that's the problem, but it turns out, in fact, it's not. It's the mitochondria. So Matt Phillips talks about these fascinating experiments where they take the cancerous nucleus out of the cancer cell and they replace it with a normal nucleus, but the cell remains cancerous. Okay, you then take a cancerous cell, you take the cancerous mitochondria out and replace them with normal mitochondria, and the cell can become normal. So I'm thinking that with the correct amount of energy production, that repairs the DNA within the nucleus. So cancer is a metabolic disorder, and you can influence it with repairing mitochondrial dysfunction. Now, neurodegenerative conditions such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease also are metabolic conditions and also can be dealt with or can be improved by improving mitochondrial dysfunction. This balance between anabolism and catabolism probably explains the diabetes part of it. Also mental health is involved in this as well. So I think there's possibly one explanation, which is mitochondrial dysfunction, which explains how all these different ways of interacting with our biochemistry and our physiology works. It gives us an opportunity, I think, to look at a new way of doing medicine. And one of the things that I think is most important about this, if we can explain why a ketogenic diet works and a vegan diet works, we don't have to go into these tribes. We don't have to go into the whole food plant-based tribe or the keto tribe. We can both work together around the same mechanism. So, I think that's really, really exciting. I'm sure that I'm only skimming the surface of the science, and I hope that my explanation is satisfactory. But I think I now have an understanding of how a ketogenic diet works and how a whole food plant-based diet works. And to me, the solution is to get as many of those uncoupling molecules together. So that's why I talk about, when I'm teaching a ketogenic diet, I tell people to have truckloads of above ground vegetables as part of their ketogenic diet, because I reckon maximize the uncoupling proteins. Get as many as you can working for you. Involve intermittent fasting or longer fasts. So in summary, the problem is we are eating the wrong foods and we are eating too often. I think those two problems are the cause of the mitochondrial dysfunction and can be fixed with medical nutrition therapies. Thank you.